Please turn your Bibles with me over to the book of 1 John. 1 John chapter 3. In the book of 1 John, we are watching what's going on in Asia Minor. In the time of the Apostle John, when he was ministering to those people that Paul had ministered to before. This is years later. And we are looking for clues of what is happening there that made John write the book of 1 John. Because when we look at the author's original intent to his original audience, then we are much safer in making application to our own life. If we don't do that, we go way out on a limb and go places that the author never even intended or dreamed of us going with a passage, because he wrote this for a certain reason. And the Spirit of God used that situation. Okay? When we understand that, then we can talk about making application. So with that in mind, let's look at chapter 3, verse 1. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know Him. Dear friends, now we are children of God. And what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when He appears, we shall be like Him. For we shall see Him as He is. Everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. Okay. We talked last week about the confidence that we can have as children of God. We talked about an amazing feeling, what confidence feels like, and what takes away our confidence. Well, there's some hints right here in this passage that people don't recognize that these recipients of this letter are the children of God. Why? Well, what do the children of God look like? What do they look like? We all think they look like us, right? So does everybody else. In this first century, you've got two different backgrounds coming together. Right? You've got the Jewish background that has a very, very limited idea of what God looks like. And a very limited way that comes across, the way that they dress, the way they act, and the way they treat other people. Then you've got the Greek background. You guys remember your Greek mythology? What do the Greek gods look like? Well, if you look at statues, they all look pretty good. Right? They're pretty buff, or they're beautiful. You know, they're kind of the epitome of the human beauty. So, what would you look like as children of God in that culture? Right. Have to look beautiful, buff, in shape. What do the children of God look like? What kind of clothes do they wear? If someone said, "Oh, you guys don't look like Christians," right? I'm looking out there. I count one tie. Two. Sorry, Dr. G. Sorry, didn't want. Randy, you don't have one on back there, do you? No. Okay. All right. Two ties. Okay. A couple weeks ago, I wore a tie. I thought people thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me. What do the children? What do disciples look like? What do Christians look like? How do you recognize the children of God? I mean, it's pretty plain, isn't it? They all look the same, don't they? We've got the Burmese church that meets here in the afternoon, and we are thrilled to make available our facilities to them. And they have their first wedding as a church, and they're very excited about that, okay? So what does a Christian wedding look like? These are believers. As disciples, we say, yes, they're children of God, they're believers. What does their wedding look like? Well, it'd be interesting to go back there and look to see what the reception looks like. And it'd be great to be able to peek in and see what does a Christian wedding look like? Does it always look like the ones that you've seen? Do they do the same things the exact same way as us? No, they don't. The world doesn't recognize you as children of God. Well, what are they looking for? What is your criteria? Some of you wouldn't be recognized as disciples by your grandparents. Why? Because you don't have hats. And you don't have gloves, and some of you are wearing pants. Or you don't have the little, little suit coats that are going tight here. What does a disciple look like? Do you know there are more disciples of Christ in our denomination in the area of the Congo than there are in the United States? They look just like you. They meet just like you do. They sing just like you. No, they don't. So somebody is wondering in the first century in Asia Minor. They're saying, you guys don't even look like the children of God. He says, how great the Father's love He's lavished on that we should be called children of God, and that's what we are. But some people don't recognize that. Does that take away your confidence? I hope not. I hope your confidence isn't in people recognizing you looking like the children of God. And here's what John said. Here is the kicker, okay? God came and they didn't recognize Him. Did they? What did they do to God when He came? Well, they argued with Him. They disagreed with Him. They persecuted Him. And then they crucified Him. How do you expect it to be any better for you? There are some people who want to be the authority and who are the children of God. They want to be the ones that say, oh, I know. Oh, and you're not one of them. And they want to take away your confidence. Or they want to manipulate you and control your behavior, control what you dress, what you say, where you live. We all know that God blesses His children, right? So all God's children are rich. We know that. We know that God doesn't like those foreign-made cars, so we know that all children of God drive American-made cars, at least Cadillacs. It's silly. It's just silly. What do you expect the children of God to look like? Well, if you don't recognize Jesus, you won't recognize the children of God. And then there's this other thing that they have going. This other thing is, what are we going to look like later on? I mean, we've talked about that. Paul dealt with this whole thing. Okay, because the early Christian church, or we think the early Christian church, had this idea that there would be a bodily resurrection and God is going to use the same material He used before to give you a new body. And you have these things like when Paul said, may your whole body be kept sound until the coming of Jesus. Basically he's saying, may you live long enough to see the coming of Jesus. But we have this thing. And guys, we still have it. It has to do with the preserving of this body, thinking that God is going to reuse the same material because He's in the recycling. And give us a new body. Some of you are looking at me like, what in the world are you talking about, Gary? Well, we embalm bodies to preserve them. And it wasn't just so they didn't smell bad at the time of the funeral. That is a nice plus, though. That is. But we still bring flowers to mask the smell. Okay? And that's become a tradition that we hand down, and it becomes very expensive at funerals. We still people instead of cremating them because we think, what do we think? That God needs to reuse the material. That's something that we have. Something that we have just passed on without thinking about it. How many of you plan to be cremated? Cool. If I would have asked that question 40 years ago, nobody would have raised their hand. Okay. Things change. Anyway, this has been years since Christ has come when John writes this letter. Possibly over 50. And those who have been believers and have died, they don't look so good anymore. Right? There's just not much left of them. And so there's this controversy that people love to talk about. They said, what's this new body going to look like? And we saw that in the book of 2 Corinthians when we went through that. Actually, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. What's it going to look like? What's this new body going to look like? And Paul said, we don't know. When Jesus comes, we're going to be like him. And John just said the same thing. Did you catch that? He said, we don't know, but when Jesus comes, we're going to be just like him. How do you recognize the children of God? How are you going to recognize them when Jesus comes back? Well, they're going to look like him. We're going to see him the way that he is. Whatever that is going to look like. Okay? Some of us are hoping that means taller. Some of us hoping it means, some of us hoping it means that we can walk around without moaning. We have a hope that things are going to be different for us. We have some people who try to take away our confidence. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God. And what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. For we shall see him as he is. Everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure. So you start out with this belief, this trust that God has made you a child of God. And it's not that you look differently than everybody else. It's not because you deserve it more than anybody else. It's because he promised that he would do that for those who trust in Jesus. That's it. And then you move on to, how does that make us act? Those who have that hope purify themselves, just as he is pure. Now, they don't purify themselves so they can have that hope. Do you see the difference? They don't reach a certain level of morality, reach a certain level of specialness, or a certain level of righteousness so they can have that hope. No. No. They have that hope. And because of that, they act differently. Because of that, they control their behavior based on that hope that they have. And John's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about what it means. And he's going to talk about those who live right. And he's going to talk about sin. And he's going to talk about the litmus test of all of it. And you remember what that is? We've seen it already. Can they love? That's what it comes down to. You do what's right based on love. Can you love? Is that possible for you? Has God made that progress in your life because of that hope? And if he hasn't, then you're going down the wrong path. You're following the wrong leader. You are creating your God instead of following the God that Jesus has revealed to us. Now, we'll talk about that in the following weeks because it comes up in this text. Doing what's right. Definition of sin. But it always starts this way. In your life, you have that hope because of that sacrifice Jesus has made. And all your hope is here. And because it's here, then you're going to start treating people differently. You're going to start wanting to be like this God that has drawn you by the sacrifice. It's not the other way around. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. And that's the way it's got to be. And I don't care who's out there saying, well, I don't know, Gary doesn't look like a child of God. And he sure doesn't dress like a preacher. You know, I really don't put a whole lot of mental time into that kind of thing. And I know that there's some people who would rather have me wear my robe every day. Hey, okay, you get it twice a year, you're lucky. Okay? I'm not setting myself apart from anybody based on a robe. We are all common in Jesus. We all have the same hope. And you're not going to look at me and say, oh, well, you know, Gary drives a Mazda, therefore Christians don't drive a Mazda. No. How do we recognize a child of God? Well, every child of God points to Jesus. That's it. That's it. If any child of God is pointing to themselves, oh, goodness, run the other way. Don't walk. Run. Everybody who has this hope points at Jesus. It says it's Jesus. It's all about Jesus. And they say, wow, you know, the way you love, the way you make me feel is great. And they say, well, that's fantastic. Jesus, it's Jesus. It's Jesus that I learned that from. It's Jesus in my life. It's the reason I have that hope. So, well, that's a great sermon. You know what? The fact is, Jesus wrote it. Okay? If we're looking at Jesus, it's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. And we can be disciples of Jesus. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And if the world doesn't recognize us, well, that's okay, as it didn't recognize Jesus. And who are we pointing at? Jesus. And if other religious groups don't recognize us, that's okay. They didn't recognize Jesus. And who are we pointing to? Jesus. And if we're not known for our love for each other, if we're known for any other thing besides the way we love each other, then we're wrong. We're wrong. They'll know you are disciples by your love. That's how they'll know. And you will love each other because you're all pointing to Jesus and going, wow, how great is the love of the Father that He's lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are because of Jesus. And guess what we're going to talk about next week? Jesus. And guess what we're going to talk about next month? Jesus. And then come back a year from now, you know what we're going to be talking about? Jesus. And if we write any new songs, you know what the songs are going to be about? Jesus. Huh? And if we start any new ministries, you know what those ministries are going to be about? Jesus. Did we get tired of it? Oh no. Every week we're going, man, I am so glad I can spend some time refocusing and remembering and just centering on Jesus.